Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Campus Consultancy. This morning, this is episode number 27. So on your Tuesday morning, if you're joining us, thank you, welcome. We always appreciate having you here. And today, after this very quick introduction, I will introduce you to our special guest, Jonathan from RMIT. See you in a second. Good morning again and welcome. So let's get straight into it today. We have an amazing guest on, Jonathan Boimel from RMIT. It's a pleasure to have you here, my friend. And I think in a moment after I let you introduce yourself, I'll have to share a little bit of the origin story and the part that you played in this, which was really, really special to me. But before I do any of that, before we talk about where unis will be 10 years from now and a couple of principles of how universities, staff, students might think about navigating the way, I'd like to pass it over to you. And if you would tell the world, who is Jonathan and what is Jonathan all about?
Thanks, Josh. It's fantastic to be here. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you. My name is Jonathan Boimel. I'm an associate professor in the School of Economics, Finance and Marketing at RMIT University. I'm Deputy Dean of Learning and Teaching, and at the moment I'm also Acting Dean of the school. So taking care of a couple of jobs at the moment.
Very nice. I have to ask, what's it like to, in a time of challenge, but also a time of opportunity, to be given the role of acting dean?
Look, it's been interesting. You know, there is the idea that education has fundamentally shifted, and we've got some short-term challenges which we're addressing, but we're also really focused on what we need in the long term. To set us up, to future-proof us.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot of short-term thinking, but increasingly a lot of medium and long-term strategizing.
Of course. And knowing lots of students listen in the mornings, and if you do, welcome. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know in the comments, or feel free to click through the link and come on and ask a question. We'd love to have you. But also knowing lots of university staff, particularly people in sort of program design, program leadership, and careers and employability. We have lots and lots of comments and messages and engagement from those groups. And I know when I was a student, I really didn't ever get to hear too much about what was happening up in the higher echelons of the university. I never really paid too much mind as a student into how much thought and strategy obviously went into the future direction of the university. So if you had a group of students come to you and say, "Hey, Jonathan, what do those conversations look like? Like, what are the heads of the university thinking about, speaking about? What questions are they asking themselves? What might you tell a group of curious students?"
Sure. Well, I'd say at the moment our focus in the short term is the transition to online delivery, and how do we really set up a great student experience when we're facing some cash flow issues, right? As a result of travel restrictions, right? So we're trying to meet the needs of our existing students the best way that we can in a very new environment, both for staff and for students. Where everything that we're used to doing has been upended. There's been some tremendous upskilling of our staff over the last few months, and I'm incredibly proud of our team at RMIT. But that's very much our short-term focus. I think we've had a separation from campus, a trial separation from campus, and it's given us an opportunity to really deeply reflect on what's important for students, right? How do we want to get there? What is the preferred future state? What did we do before, right? Are we happy with what we did before? How do we prepare for the next storm, right? So it's been a fantastic opportunity, to be honest, to contemplate, the future state of the university. And there are a number of themes that we always return to. But yeah, a lot of planning, a lot of thinking, making sure that we've got the short-term settings right in terms of sustainability, right? And then, okay, if the short-term has been assured, how then do we go forward?
Yes. What do you think it is from the student? What are you hearing at a student level from what you think students are asking for? If university staff are out there and they're like, okay, and across economics, finance, and marketing, you probably hear a lot from students, or trickling all the way up, or very directly coming the way up from all the staff. What is it that students are asking for right now? And have you seen any great examples of ways that staff, once they have upskilled, that they've then been able to deliver on that value?
Sure. So I think, we've got two parts to our business. We've got the credential part, right? We deliver programs and we provide certificates at the end of a student's journey, but we're also all about the experience. And I think in part something that I've noticed is that if you put aside the technology, what's incredibly important at this stage of the learning journey is meeting students' psychological needs.
Yes.
Right? They need to feel secure. They need to feel in control, right? Given that the external environment, right, is upended.
Yes.
So that's something I think that we've noticed, and it's the academics who can deliver on that, right? Those
It's
academics are
interesting.
making a real impact, and not so much about the traditional sort of growth and mastery. They're going to come second, right?
Yes.
Until you meet those really basic fundamental needs of students, you're not
Yes.
going to get far. And I think that's where we've seen, besides some of the tremendous technological steps that have been put in place to remotely deliver. It's actually having that empathy and putting yourself in the shoes of students.
Yes.
Those academics who are able to do that are able to actually take the students along with them over the semester.
Well, that's really, really interesting, and this is obviously a topic that's resonating with people. Everyone is blowing up either the chat, the comment. We've got guests waiting and comments waiting to be shared. So Namisha, Sarah, and Heather, good morning, good morning, good morning to all of you. Covering at least 3 states of Australia, which is awesome. We've got Cece, who might come on in a second if we get the camera happening. Tuning in from New Zealand, and when we talk about those needs, one of the things that I found really interesting. I actually ran a workshop yesterday on these sort of needs and where students were at. And one of the things that came up from that was we had about 30 people, and I looked at these 6 different things and I graphed them. And what surprised me the most was some of those lower level needs were actually some of the highest satisfied in this cohort. And this is a small sample size, so 25, 30,
Sure.
something like that.
Sure.
But within that group, once they sort of had like the roof over their head and the food in the fridge and things like that, what was really low was a sense of like things that were new and novel and variety, and a real sense of connection. Like it came through so clearly in the data. So I'd love to dig into that with you in a second around
Sure, Josh.
what does that mean? How do we use that information?
Yeah. What's really interesting, Josh, and it's not just during a time of crisis, but when we take a look at what's important for student outcomes in terms of thriving in the workplace and thriving in life 5-10 years after graduation, the major contributors are, well, from an academic perspective, having some work integrated learning during their program of study, being able to work on a longer term project, so some problem-based learning. But the third factor is whether or not students have had some emotional attachment with their educators, right? Whether an educator has visibly cared for them during their program of study. So I think that's important now during a time of crisis where you have some of these really core needs about, needing to feel in control, needing to have a sense of direction.
Yes.
But also, once this period is over, I think, acknowledging those needs are absolutely vital if we want to set students up for success, right? 5-10 years after they've completed a program of study. All right. We want to see them thriving in the workplace. We want to see them,
Yes.
thriving in life more generally. And certainly that emotional connection is vital. When I take a look at the qualitative comments on courses as part of student evaluations, it's virtually nothing about the content, right? Because we know content is freely available. Right. And of course, this is one of the, the challenges that universities face. Content is freely available. What really resonates with students is whether there has been that connection, right? My lecturer or my tutor cared about me. They took an interest in me. They played the role of a mentor. There was this sense of partnership, right? As we embarked on that learning journey. Almost nothing about content. And I think, when we're talking about the future state of the university and the sector more generally, I think we do want to put those front and center when we come to designing learning activities, designing a program of study.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Let's dig into that. And I also want to take and steer this in a moment after we bring Cece on to hear from that other side of the perspective. Speaking of putting things front and center, I really want to hear about a couple more of those changes and where you think things might be changing over the next decade. But to join us and to hear another perspective on this as well, quickly jumping in on the line is the wonderful Cece. Cece, good morning there. I think we have you on mute, my friend. Can you hear us?
Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good morning, Cece.
Good morning.
Hi, Cece. Do you want to tell Jonathan and tell anyone listening, of course, obviously, who you are? And then if you have a comment, a question, or a thought, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so I'm Cece, and I'm currently a second-year public relations undergrad at Deakin University. So I find this topic really interesting because I know emotional attachment to tutors and professors are really important to us because in times like this, especially in times like this, I've already met some of the tutors that have actually inspired me to actually go out there and explore myself more. So I feel I would love to hear more about this before I have any questions for you guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Cece, I think what's really, really important, we can take a look at this two ways. We can recognize the importance of human skills, right? Empathy, communication skills, teamwork for students' future job prospects. So we talk about that quite a lot, right? There's going to be, in the future, regardless of what discipline you're in, the real focus on these human skills. But I think as educators, what's really important is that we recognize psychological needs of students. And we attempt to meet those needs as part of a student's learning journey. So take a look at those factors that underpin both well-being as well as motivation. And we know that at the moment, with online learning, there are a number of students who have spoken about challenges with motivation. And I think there's a really clear link between motivation and whether students' psychological needs are being met, right? Students,
Sure.
particularly during a time of transition, right, where you've left high school, you're moving into university, your identity is in transition, right? You're constructing your own identity, which is one of the wonderful opportunities that university, affords you. And you can do that in a relatively low risk environment, right?
Yeah.
When you're on the job, right? There's more of a cost if you experiment, right? But at university, when you're looking to develop your own identity, you can try and fail purposefully with little cost. Josh, you wanted to come in?
Yeah. I'd love to hear from Cece on, obviously you're a second year student and you're in this period of transition. So I'd just love to hear, what are you hearing from your peers in terms of, one, on the motivation front, like Jonathan's mentioned, are students struggling with it from your experience? And have you seen anything that works to help in that area?
Yeah, so definitely motivation is a thing that bothers us in times like this because everything is just different from the way it was before.
Sure.
We had online sections, but it's really hard for you to boost yourself out of the boundaries because right now we are not in the circumstance that we can actually control of ourselves and that kind of stuff. And I feel you need a lot to actually regain your motivation. I think one of the things that helped me a lot in times like this is how I connect with my peers during the times and actually find a way to maintain the connection, find a way to actually expand it a little bit.
Yes.
Talk to one of my tutors and that kind of stuff for the advices, and attend like sections like this really helps a lot.
Oh, Cece, that's a wonderful. I love it. And obviously connection is such a big need. We need that as human beings. You know, if people, when we're little babies, we always say in workshops, if you're little babies, if no one took care of us, parent or caregiver, we simply wouldn't be here today. You know, big brains, big creative brains. We can launch live shows and be acting deans of universities and do public media and communication degrees, big brains, but big brains mean little babies. And the downside of little babies is biologically we need people to care for us. So I think that's so ingrained. And I love your reframe there around not just sustaining connection, but expanding it. And so I wonder if people are tuning in, what would it mean during this time to expand those connections with your peers and with your staff, with the tutors, sending them that email or going that extra mile. Cece, that's a really interesting reflection. And thanks for joining us today. And we'll speak with you again soon.
No worries. Thanks.
Thanks, Cece.
Thanks, Cece. I thought that was really interesting, Josh. You know, the sense, you know, that I got from Cece also that, you know, perhaps, you know, she felt she wasn't making as much progress, you know, as she would like, right? She wanted to be, you know, challenged in a sense. She wanted to be stretched in a sense, but the environment wasn't conducive to that. And I think what's really important for students to realize is that, you know, at this time, you need to be gentle with yourself because you are being challenged and you are being stretched, right? I think that's really important to recognize. There's a sense that we may not be actors in our own journey, right? Because there's so much out of our control at the moment. But I think it's really important to know that students in this environment can feel that they are getting better at something, right?
For sure.
They are being challenged, but in a very different way. And if then there can be that sense of flow around that present state, that present challenge, I think students are then doing wonderful things that they can reflect on and then put on their CV in the future. It's just different. It's different.
It is different. And one of the comments that's come in, I'll just pop it up on the screen here. A comment on Facebook from Ashita has said, would you have any message or potentially advice for graduates of 2020? So as we start to think and look a little bit, look forward towards, you know, not only the universities changing, but the world of work is changing, and the unis obviously play a massive role in preparing a percentage of workers for that. If someone was graduating this year amidst everything that's happening, do you have any message or any words of advice or even questions that you think maybe it'd be worth them asking themselves?
Right. Look, I think it's a very good question, and it is a relatively challenging time to graduate. I think an important question to everyone is, you know, what matters to me, and then undertake some purpose-driven activity. Okay, don't think about what a potential employer is going to be looking for, right? Reflect on yourself. What does success mean to you, and how might you go about achieving it, right? And it doesn't have to be vocationally oriented, right? So I know, Josh, you know, you spend a lot of time talking about, you know, asking the questions, right, to students about what success means to them, right?
Yes.
And what sort of purpose-driven activities might they undertake? It might be some volunteering activities. It might be, you know, reconnecting with a hobby, and really having some sense of mastery over that. So I think now's the time to really look inwards, not to feel the pressure of the external environment, again, over which we have very little control. Put those vocational aspects, those industry aspects to one side for the moment, and be true to yourself. And employers will acknowledge that, right? That's what employers are actually looking for.
100%. And it's even the time I spent in graduate recruitment, one of those things we would always ask, we'd assess for. It was one of the assessment criteria, was something with the organization I was with, Teach for Australia, called commitment to mission. And it was something we were always looking for. We were saying, like, it's and we tell people explicitly all throughout the assessment process, like one of the things we're looking for is commitment to mission. And the last thing we want to encourage you to do is to fake your commitment. Like
Correct.
This isn't like if you found your own why, Simon Sinek stuff talking about this, if you found your own why, that's amazing. But a piece of his work that no one ever talks about is he also says you can find your why through somebody else's. You can find that somebody else is on a mission. You go, I believe in it. It's values aligned. I want to get on that ship, go on that journey. And if you've found an organization and that's the right one for you as a student, amazing. You know, if you're fully committed to their mission, brilliant. But if you haven't found them yet, that's also totally okay. And I think you'll find that through doing the things that resonate with you on a purpose-driven level. And if people are wondering, okay, where do I start? I always send students United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. 17 of them. They're saying here are 17, not all, but big challenges in the world. Narrow it down to 5 or 3 or 1. And then Google that in your area. There's even a website that lists every organization in Australia who says publicly they're working towards those goals. So if you care about hunger or gender equality or sustainability, find the organizations in your city or in the country who are doing it. Send them a message, volunteer, check out their website, watch their videos. Getting curious about where you want to go next rather than trying to fit yourself into a box out of fear of maybe I won't get a job. And I know it sounds easy to do, but
no, absolutely.
Critical.
Absolutely. And don't just reflect on, the skills that you have at the moment, and then you need to direct yourselves and throw yourself into that sort of area, but try different things, try new things, and you'll find that, your authentic self emerges over time as you experience different things. There's the activity part, right, in terms of what you do while you may, be looking for a job or about to graduate, but there's also the narrative around that activity, right? So you want to spend time and, talk to your peers, talk to me, right? Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to assist. How do you craft a compelling narrative around what you've been doing? You may think, right, that, it's very difficult to frame in a way that, employers will be interested in what you're doing. But there are many ways to craft a compelling narrative around what have I been doing? What does that say about me? And the value that I can provide to any organization. So that communication piece, I think, is absolutely vital.
Nimisha, I think you're spot on there. Nimisha, I was reading out who I was going to ask you a question from. Jonathan, you're spot on there. Nimisha has a question. Sorry, I'm like, Nimisha? Nimisha has a question. And I think it taps into that around the narrative of where you are and also where you've been. So when we're talking about universities of the future, one of the big things, obviously, that feeds into the university experience is on campus. So what's it like to prepare or think you're going to be an on-campus student and then actually transition to online? And Nimisha's at Monash University doing a master's. And Nimisha asks, what are your thoughts about fees being paid by students for courses online? Is a part of the fees they pay for infrastructure use? Rebates, your thoughts? Where do you think that, obviously we've heard that conversation in the culture quite a bit. What is that? Yeah, what do you think about that? What are you hearing about that? I'd love to know where you might take that.
Sure. And Josh, we discussed this, just before we went live. And I certainly feel this vibe coming from students. Again, we've got the credential part. Students are still going to get their degrees if they can successfully complete a program of study. But there's the experience part, and there is the concern amongst a number of students that experience has diminished, and universities are obviously incredibly sensitive to that point. Certainly above my pay grade to talk about rebates and so on. But I get it, right? I get it. If I was a student, I'd be thinking the same way. That sort of holistic university experience, right? Not just the learning and teaching part, but the activities on campus and so on, the connections that we make, that's all part of the university experience. And I certainly appreciate students saying, well, at the moment, I'm not getting the full package. I think what's really important from university's perspective is that what's absolutely vital for us is that we continue to deliver for our current students.
Yes.
Okay, and we safeguard our financial viability, so we are able to continue to deliver to our current students. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's that balance, right? We're absolutely committed to our current students. The form of that commitment, right? The nature of that commitment, well, there may be a trade-off, right? There may be a trade-off. We want to make sure that we safeguard, right, the present state, and ensure our financial viability, so we can continue to deliver to students in the best way that we can, and provide the best experience. Right.
Yes.
That's not to say that, again, that I don't recognise that what people are feeling, what students are feeling. They're not getting the experience that they may have expected.
Yeah.
But it's
That's such an interesting
it's a
insight.
challenge. It's a challenge for us, and there are no easy answers. It's what we'd call a wicked problem, right?
Yes.
It's a
And
wicked problem.
it is a wicked problem that as a country too, we've done relatively well at minimizing the length of too. I mean, the fact that, fine, if we're students, they might not get what they were expecting, but we've stayed home, staff have stayed home. Like, these aren't easy calls to make. And people who are, if you put that empathy hat on for students of the university sector too, of going, it's a massive risk to even say we're going to close the campus. Because what does that mean for, the universities have employ 100,000 people in the country. Like, it's a lot of mums and dads out there and kids in primary school who are, and I want to take this somewhere, but who are, it's their job and their source of income as well. And then as we look forward and we say, okay, we've all done what we needed to do. We've stayed home. We've transitioned online. We're live streaming from our lounge rooms. But the benefit of that is it will pass. And as we look towards the future, as we look towards, the next 6 months, but also the next decade in where unis go, I think there's some invaluable things that have come out of this for how we deal with, whether it's engaging with employers or how we obviously learn online or how we build relationships in an online world, for a world of work that is online and agile. A third of the US workforce are in the gig economy. Like, that's where we're headed. So I think this is less the opposite of the normal world. And I think it's a little bit of an insight and a peek behind the curtains of this is where things are kind of are going in some ways. So I'd love to know, what do you think as we look a bit further forward, as we start to come out of this, as new norms start to establish?
Sure.
Do you think there's anything from this that will keep?
Oh, look, absolutely. As I was preparing for our discussions today, I jotted down 5 points. Right. The first was, we've had an opportunity now to really think about reimagining the campus. Right. So we've had a trial separation from the campus.
Yes.
When we get back to the campus, right, what does it look like? Okay, in terms of how we want to deliver, right? We know how students learn best, right? Students learn best through active learning, right?
Yes.
That's how you make ideas stick, right? That's how you can then use those ideas in a novel setting. We have some beautiful buildings, iconic buildings. We have some grand lecture theatres. The question is whether those type of spaces facilitate the learning that we want to have at university. So again, I think there's going to be room to think about how to repurpose our lecture theatres to facilitate active learning. The spaces, the physical spaces. I think that's going to be vitally important. And also thinking about what a campus means, right? When you're learning online, you're still part of a campus, right? You're still making those connections, but you're not part of a physical campus. So if we've got a classroom that's tech enabled, it's accessible, it's practical, and at the same time, the boundaries of the campus have expanded to include, online learning and online engagement. I think the whole concept of a campus has been reimagined and will continue to be reimagined over the next several years. So that's that's the first learning, I think, that we've taken as a result of this trial separation.
Yes.
The other thing that's really important is, I think, an important learning, and I mentioned this before, is reimagining the role of the educator. Okay, so at this time, we really don't have the sage on the stage anymore.
Yes.
And I think we need to start planning for a new type of educator, right? Again, if content is freely available, right, we need someone who firstly can relate that knowledge, right, who can be the aggregator and the curator of specialized knowledge and specialized wisdom. That's really important. And what are the skills that it takes to actually be a facilitator? And again, we know what students are looking for. They're looking for inspiration, right? They're looking for some connection. So reimagining the role of the educator, I think, is very important. And we've seen that again over the last few months, that the educators who have been able to do well in this environment in terms of meeting the needs of students have been those that have been deeply empathetic, who understand where students are, right? Who break things down, right, to make the journey very clear for students, right? There are a number of things that you can do to meet those, those basic psychological needs of students. The need for feedback, a whole range of things. They're not just important as part of the learning journey, and as academics, we traditionally view this as, important. Feedback is important for learning, right? But feedback is also vitally important for well-being, right?
Yes.
And I think reframing some of these concepts that academics are familiar with, but looking at it through a well-being lens or a psychological need lens, I think will serve us very well in the future as universities. And again, it's been a time of deep contemplation about these things, right? What do students need at this very challenging time?
I absolutely love that. One of the things you just sparked in me when you're thinking about redefining the role of the educator was, and the relationship with connection there. One of the things that no one ever asks about, but I'm up at 6 o'clock this morning until I messaged you at 7:30. I was on LinkedIn replying to in messages from over the weekend. So had the weekend off and I opened it up. There's 100 messages there from students who business ideas, want to get an internship, want to start a job, not sure about this, everything. And one of the things I never mentioned, no one ever asked about with workshops is so much of the follow-up to a workshop. I might do a 1 hour workshop or a 2 hour workshop, but then there's multiple hours of follow-up over sometimes years of calls and check-ins and coffees and messages and that time on the outside. Because I know that idea of reinforcing the learning, rewarding, motivating, monitoring, adjusting, applying, all the follow-up is so crucial. And it's something that one of the things the thing that you made me realize there was I don't think I educate students half as much as they educate me. And that's not lip service because because it's a business. That's where my business goes. I put up a post about internships yesterday and 20 people comment and 10 people message me going, how do I find this workshop? And I'm like, okay, that's the pulse of the culture. That's a problem. And now that's the thing I can, I'm universities. Well, I've got this workshop. We've run it a couple of times, but it's always that feedback for me about what do students want, but it's being willing to put in the work first and then learn.
Absolutely, Josh. And these sort of needs or expectations aren't static, right?
No
so
way.
if I think of a student in semester 1, and what they expect from, what they're expecting now in terms of online delivery, it's going to be very different to what they expect in semester 2, right? So they've been willing to cut the university some slack because they realize that we've had to pivot, right, very rapidly, right? Now, will they have those same sort of set of expectations in semester 2? No, I think those expectations will be higher. right? So, the university certainly has an awareness of the need to meet those higher expectations, but it's an awareness of how those expectations and how those needs change over time. And it's interesting sort of discussing changes over time. One of the other points that I think is going to be very important over the next few years in terms of what the university delivers is how we reimagine a program of study. Okay, so you enroll in a
Yes.
program, right? The program takes 3 years. Okay, come to the end of the program. Well, how relevant were those 3 years, right, to where the world is now? There are many different models, right, of university delivery. Right, you could have a subscription model, right? So rather than saying, okay, you're going to have 3 years, right? Maybe a gap year somewhere along the way, but you're going to have 3 years. What we say no is we're going to offer you a subscription, right? And as you go along, right, over the next 3, 4, 7, 10 years, right, you can tap in to units as you see fit, right? Something that you can curate yourself, right? And of course, that is not only important in terms of meeting current demands of industry, right? But it also gives you that sense of power, right? And something that you can craft yourself. The other thing, Josh, is a formal open loop type of environment, and that is you start off, you do a couple of years, you go out to industry, right, and then you loop back. We provide a formal opportunity for you to loop back, right? Maybe after a few months or 3 years. Okay, so there are a number of models that can ensure that the university delivers what is relevant to you, right, at the time that you find yourself at.
Yes. And that starts, I mean, we're seeing obviously that booming now, the increase of work integrated learning and those blurred lines, all the way up to virtual internships.
Which is fantastic.
Love it,
Can I
right?
tell you that's something that really excites me,
Cool.
because sometimes universities, are a slow-moving ship, right? And this is one thing that I've been incredibly excited about in terms of the new world of work. Work integrated learning must be virtual, right? You have to offer that opportunity. And I know certainly at RMIT, we've actually taken significant steps in that direction. So that's something I'm very excited about, because that really aligns to the world of work.
And it's where things like, obviously, with the examples, sort of like a Volley in the world, who are amazing and mutual friends of ours, obviously, one of the things I love about that, like when I first heard Matt and Tanya speak about that concept, the thing it made me think of was we speak to thousands of students who have these incredible technical skills, and they're developing a range of skills. And there are all these problems in the world, and there's no one connecting those two dots. And it's like, how many people even in Melbourne, where we both are, would love to sit down with an accountant at tax time, let alone small business owners, let alone regional areas, let alone countries who don't have the same level of education or resources or access. And we've got accountants, we've got marketers, we've got economists, we've got finance students, we've got engineers, we've got all these people, we've got an abundance of talent. And it's unevenly distributed geographically and socially in terms of the connection. So anything that blurs those lines, that
100%.
connects people, I think and then as those people go off into the future of work, that idea of coming back to university as their careers develop, I think that's such an interesting transition that, the first time my alma mater contacted me after university, which is common for lots of universities, was to ask for money for a donation to something. And it was like 7 years later, and I'm on the phone with this poor girl, and I'm like, I gave her a coaching call about how to be more effective at asking for money for people, because at the time I had no money, but I thought I could give her some tips. And I was like, that's all I've got to offer you, like that's I'm a backpacker traveling around the world. But I think there's that real change of what does it mean to build community while we're there, and then once they leave, it's a long part of the journey.
Absolutely. And another aspect of that is, as more and more of these platforms emerge, we're going to find that learning takes place in more places than ever.
Oh, I
Right?
love that.
And the question is, okay, from a university's perspective, right? How do we credentialize that? Right? How do we recognize that as part of a program of study? And I think that's going to be another significant change, right? It's not easy. It's not an easy body of work, but I think, yeah, with all these amazing opportunities, which are facilitated by these platforms that are emerging, what will the university do in terms of recognizing them, recognizing these activities for credit? And so you have this portfolio of experiences, and they are, in some ways certified by the university. I think over the next several years, that's going to be a very big area of growth, because we've got 47 universities, right? We're in quite a competitive environment, okay? But there's a limit to what any one university can do, right? So as with any traditional business, we look at what we can, outsource, what we can do in-house. But when it comes to student learning, right, there's a lot that can be outsourced. And in fact, there is a lot that is outsourced, right? Because students are learning, right, outside of the classroom, right?
Yes.
Right? Very often more than they are learning inside the classroom. So as a normal business outsources a lot of its activities, how do we recognize the learning that has been effectively outsourced, right? The learning that is taking place outside of the classroom, and how do we recognize that for credit? I think that again will be something that will be really interesting to watch in the next few years. There are some vendors out there who are trying to model this, right? And there's a portfolio of activities and so on and so forth, which they capture. It'd be interesting to see, though, how the university itself actually does this formally.
Yes, I agree. Jonathan, I could talk to you about this stuff forever. I'm so fascinated by it. I genuinely I love it. The fact uni right now is so interesting. So as soon as you think of it a couple of years in the future, it just becomes fascinating. And hopefully we both have many, many long years ahead in that space. I want to ask you, and before you go, you've been so generous with your time, those insights that you were sharing about some of the key changes and some of the direct feedback to students as well, really, really helpful. If the 48th university was the Boimel University of Excellence, and it taught anything and it operated any which way, and you had unlimited budget, and anything was possible. If you could offer an idea to the sector, or if there was something that you'd like to see tried or experimented with at the Boimel University of Excellence, what's an initiative that you'd like to see rolled out sometime in the next 10 years?
I think what we are going to see over the next few years, and I certainly would be very excited to be a part of it, is really focusing on experiential learning in a problem-based setting with interdisciplinary teams of students. And that is, you have some foundational courses, right, within your own discipline.
Yeah.
But at some point in the program, students come together to work on wicked problems. Okay. And students learn how to take on board the ideas of others. Students learn how to take feedback on board and how to respond to feedback, right? Respecting other perspectives. That sort of interdisciplinary work, highly experiential, within a problem-based setting, I think would do absolute wonders. That's something that I'd like to be involved in if I could create a boutique bespoke university.
I love it. That's brilliant. And no doubt we'll see more and more of that on the rise.
Absolutely.
Jonathan, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Josh, it's been wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Lovely chatting with you too. And everyone, thank you for tuning in today. This has been episode 27 of Coffee with Campus Consultancy, joined by the wonderful Jonathan, whose name I'll pop back up, and has very generously said if you'd like to follow along or connect on LinkedIn, I think it's probably a great place to go. I love the content you share on LinkedIn and your ability to take, obviously with such expertise, take a concept and then sum it up in a paragraph. Sometimes I read the whole source and sometimes I just read your paragraph insight and I'm like, oh, I get it. Like you've taken a book to a paragraph to an article and an article to a paragraph. So I really recommend following everything Jonathan shares on LinkedIn. I love it. And I've learned a lot and will continue to learn a lot from him. So thank you again one more time, my friend. And we will see all of you again tomorrow if you're joining us for episode 28. We'd love to see you there. And if you're enjoying these morning shows, please share it, tag it, send it to a friend, or send us a message afterwards and let us know what you think. So finally, that's it for today. Thanks all. We will see you later. And thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Josh.